Welcome to our show. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of medical history. We have an expert with us who's going to tell us all about a pivotal figure in Western medicine. Can you introduce us to this important historical figure?
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about Claudius Galen, a name that might not be familiar to everyone, but his influence on Western medicine is truly remarkable. Galen's ideas shaped medical practice for over 1,000 years, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it.
Wow, over 1,000 years. That's incredible. So was Galen always held in such high regard?
Well, that's an interesting question. For centuries, Galen's theories were considered almost untouchable. But as with many things in science and medicine, his work eventually came under scrutiny. In later times, his ideas were heavily criticized and, to put it bluntly, thoroughly dismantled.
Fascinating. Can you tell us a bit about Galen's early life? Where did he come from?
Sure thing. Galen was born in Pergamon, which was a thriving city in the Roman Empire. Today you'd find it in Turkey, near the Aegean Sea. As a child, Galen was quite the prodigy. He had a sharp mind and was interested in all sorts of subjects: astronomy, astrology, philosophy, you name it. But his true passion? That was medicine.
It sounds like Pergamon was quite the intellectual hub. Did that environment influence Galen's development?
Absolutely. Pergamon was home to many philosophers from various schools of thought. Galen particularly enjoyed the philosophies of Aristotle and Epicurus. But what really set him on his path was a temple near Pergamon dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine. Young Galen actually worked there as an assistant priest.
That's quite the start. So, how did Galen further his medical education?
Well, after learning from local doctors and sadly after his father's death, Galen decided to broaden his horizons. He embarked on a journey, visiting numerous cities around the Mediterranean. This whole region shared a common cultural sphere heavily influenced by Greek civilization.
It seems like Greek culture had a big impact on the region. Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly. This area was once part of Alexander the Great's vast empire. After Alexander's death, his empire split into three major kingdoms: Macedonia, Ptolemaic, and Seleucid. The Ptolemaic kingdom, which ruled over Egypt, established Alexandria as the cultural and commercial powerhouse of the Mediterranean.
Alexandria sounds like it was quite the place. What made it so special?
Oh, Alexandria was truly remarkable. It boasted an enormous library with a staggering 700,000 volumes. But it wasn't just a library. There was also a museum that functioned like a modern-day university. We're talking laboratories, dissection rooms, botanical and zoological gardens, and even government-funded accommodations for scientists and philosophers. It was the Silicon Valley of its time.
That's incredible. So I'm guessing Alexandria was the place to be for medical studies?
You've got it. Alexandria became the most advanced region for medical studies in the ancient world. The medical experts there not only inherited Hippocrates' four humors theory, but also made significant strides in anatomy. This was possible due to different cultural traditions in Egypt.
Different cultural traditions. How did that play into medical advancements?
Well, in Egypt, there was a long-standing tradition of mummifying pharaohs. This process required the removal and preservation of internal organs, which gave Egyptian priests a deep understanding of human anatomy. This wasn't possible in Greece due to cultural restrictions. Under the Ptolemaic dynasty, doctors in Alexandria were even allowed to dissect the bodies of executed criminals for medical research.
That's fascinating. Were there any standout figures in Alexandrian medicine during this time?
Absolutely. Two of the most renowned anatomists in Alexandria were Herophilus and Erasistratus. Interestingly, these two held completely opposing academic views. One supported the four humors theory, while the other was strongly against it. Their disciples formed two rival schools of thought, leading to debates that lasted for centuries.
It sounds like Alexandria was a hotbed of medical debate and discovery. Did this golden age last?
Unfortunately, no. The glory days of Alexandria came to an abrupt end when the magnificent Alexandria Library was accidentally burned down by Caesar's forces during his conquest of Egypt. This event marked the beginning of Alexandria's decline as a center of learning.
That's a real tragedy. So where does Galen fit into this timeline?
Well, Galen arrived in Alexandria to study anatomy about 500 years after the time of Herophilus and Erasistratus. Even though Alexandria's glory had faded, it still maintained the strongest tradition of anatomical studies in the Mediterranean region. However, by Galen's time, human dissection was no longer permitted, so he had to make do with studying animal carcasses.
How did Galen manage his studies without access to human cadavers?
That's a great question. Galen spent 5 years in Alexandria, acquiring extensive medical knowledge. He dissected numerous animals, with a particular fondness for Barbary macaques. He chose these monkeys because they were readily available and, in his view, closely resembled humans in their anatomy. He even noted that, like humans, these monkeys had short tails, which he considered a sign of similarity.
That's quite resourceful. But surely monkey anatomy isn't exactly the same as human anatomy. How did Galen bridge that gap?
You're absolutely right, and that was a real challenge for Galen. He couldn't simply rely on external appearances, and grave robbing was out of the question. Instead, Galen had to seize rare opportunities, such as when floods exposed human remains. He would quickly examine and document these findings, hoping for such natural occurrences to further his research.
Wow, talk about making the most of a difficult situation. So what did Galen do after his time in Alexandria?
After completing his studies in Alexandria, Galen returned to his hometown of Pergamon. His first job was quite unique. He became a physician for gladiators. This role provided him with incredible opportunities to observe and treat various injuries. Whether from sword fights or battles with lions and tigers, gladiators frequently suffered wounds that required medical attention.
That sounds like a challenging but exciting job. How did Galen perform in this role?
Galen excelled in this position. His skill as a physician was evident in his success rate. During his tenure as the gladiators' doctor, only 5 fighters died under his care, compared to about 60 deaths under previous physicians. This impressive record caught the attention of wealthy and influential patients, and Galen's reputation began to grow.
It seems like Galen was on the fast track to success in Pergamon. Did he stay there?
Actually, no. Galen had greater ambitions. In 161 AD, he decided to journey to Rome, the capital of the empire. After a long sea voyage and an overland trek, he arrived at the outskirts of the magnificent city in 62 AD. But let me tell you, arriving in Rome was a humbling experience for Galen.
I can imagine. How did Galen establish himself in such a bustling metropolis?
Well, it wasn't easy at first. Galen felt small and insignificant when he first entered the city, gazing upon the magnificent Colosseum and the grand dome of the Pantheon. To get his foot in the door, he began by seeking out fellow citizens from his hometown of Pergamon. This strategy proved effective, and soon, an opportunity presented itself when a renowned Epicurean scholar fell ill.
And I'm guessing Galen seized this opportunity.
He certainly did. After several prominent Roman physicians failed to cure the scholar, Galen was called in as a last resort. His treatment was successful, and as the scholar recovered, he sang Galen's praises to his numerous disciples, relatives, and friends. This event marked Galen's breakthrough in Rome, and his reputation began to grow rapidly.
That's quite the success story, but I imagine not everyone was thrilled with Galen's rapid rise to fame.
You're absolutely right. Galen's swift rise sparked jealousy among his peers. His diverse medical knowledge, drawn from various schools of thought, made him difficult to categorize. While this breadth of knowledge was advantageous for his practice, it left him without a specific allegiance to any particular medical school. Galen's pride and unwillingness to align himself with others, coupled with his reverence only for Hippocrates, further strained his relationships with fellow physicians.
It sounds like Galen had a complex personality. How did he navigate these professional challenges?
Indeed, Galen's character was multifaceted. On one hand, he treated all patients equally, regardless of their social status or wealth, sometimes even offering free treatment. But when faced with hostility from his peers, Galen didn't back down. In his writings, he fiercely criticized his fellow physicians, calling them charlatans. These harsh words became part of his legacy, preserved in his books for centuries to come.
Wow, Galen certainly didn't pull any punches. Did his outspoken nature affect his career in Rome?
Surprisingly, fortune seemed to favor Galen despite his conflicts with peers. he was presented with another excellent opportunity when the wife of a Roman consul fell ill with a gynecological condition. Galen successfully treated her, earning a handsome sum of 400 gold coins in the process. This connection elevated Galen's status, and he became the consul's family physician.
It seems like Galen's career was really taking off in Rome. Did he continue to climb the social ladder?
Absolutely. At the time, the Roman Empire was ruled by two co-emperors, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. Galen's network expanded as he befriended Verus's uncle and became acquainted with Marcus Aurelius's son-in-law. These connections opened doors to the highest echelons of Roman society.
That's incredible. With all this success, did Galen settle into a comfortable life in Rome?
You'd think so, right? But here's where things take an unexpected turn. Just as Galen seemed poised for even greater success, he made a surprising decision to return to his hometown. In 166 CE, after only 4 years in Rome, Galen packed his belongings and left the city, much to everyone's bewilderment.
That is surprising. Do we know why he made such a decision?
Well, in hindsight, it appears that Galen may have sensed an impending crisis. A strange illness had emerged among Roman legions in Syria, causing severe symptoms. With his medical expertise, Galen likely noticed similar cases appearing in Rome, possibly brought back by returning soldiers.
So was Galen's intuition correct?
Absolutely. Shortly after his departure, a devastating plague began to ravage Rome, eventually spreading to many other regions. This epidemic, known as the Antonine Plague, was one of the most severe in history, claiming the lives of approximately 1/3 of Rome's population.
That's terrifying. Do we know what caused this plague?
The exact nature of this plague remains a subject of debate among historians and medical experts. Some believe it was smallpox, potentially marking the earliest recorded outbreak of the disease. Others suggest it may have been a combination of smallpox and measles, with both diseases spreading simultaneously.
How long did Galen stay away from Rome during this crisis?
Galen spent over a year in his hometown, believing it to be a safer location. However, his fame made it impossible for him to remain hidden for long. In 169 CE, the two emperors summoned him to serve in the military, and he had no choice but to comply.
So Galen returned to serve the emperors during the plague. That must have been challenging.
Indeed it was. Upon arriving at the imperial camp in Aquileia, Galen witnessed another major outbreak of the plague. Emperor Lucius Verus fell ill and eventually succumbed to the disease, leaving Marcus Aurelius as the sole ruler.
What role did Galen play after returning to imperial service?
Well, Marcus Aurelius initially wanted Galen to serve on the front lines. However, Galen managed to convince the emperor that his talents would be better utilized in Rome, caring for the young prince Commodus. He argued that the prince was surrounded by incompetent physicians and could be at risk if he contracted the disease.
That sounds like a clever move on Galen's part. How did his colleagues react to his return?
You're right, it was a smart move, but it didn't come without criticism. Galen's return was likely met with disapproval from his colleagues who had remained to fight the epidemic. They may have viewed his earlier departure as an act of cowardice. Galen defended his actions, claiming he wasn't fleeing the plague, but was forced out by jealous colleagues who hoped he would perish. This behavior was certainly a blemish on Galen's career.
It seems like Galen lived through some tumultuous times in the Roman Empire. What happened after Marcus Aurelius?
You're right, it was a period of great change. Emperor Marcus Aurelius eventually succumbed to the disease. He was the last of the 5 good emperors, and although he ruled well, the Roman Empire was already in decline. His son Commodus, whom Galen had been tasked with protecting, proved to be a tyrant. Commodus was eventually assassinated, leading to a period of instability in the empire.
What was Galen doing during all this political turmoil?
Throughout these years, Galen continued his medical practice in Rome, witnessing the reigns and deaths of 3 emperors. Unable to prevent their deaths, Galen focused on collecting vast amounts of medical information and writing extensively. He employed 12 scribes to assist with his work, but tragically, a fire destroyed about 80% of his writings. Even so, Galen's surviving works amount to millions of words.
That's an incredible body of work. Can you tell us about Galen's medical philosophy?
Certainly. Galen's medical philosophy can be divided into 3 main areas. First, He sought to refine Hippocrates' theory of the four humors, agreeing with the concept and viewing the humors as the foundation for different temperaments. However, Galen's approach differed from Hippocrates in that he avoided discussing the exact nature of the humors. Instead, he viewed the humors as invisible entities that could only be understood through logical reasoning.
That's interesting. What were the other aspects of his philosophy?
The second aspect was astrology. Galen believed that celestial bodies influenced health. For example, they thought the sun controlled chronic diseases, Saturn caused depression, and the moon governed blood circulation. The third and largest part of his philosophy was practical experience. Through dissection and experimentation, he made significant discoveries about the nervous system, performed cataract surgeries, and disproved misconceptions about arteries.
It sounds like Galen made some significant contributions to medical knowledge. How did his work impact future generations?
Galen's impact on subsequent generations of physicians was unparalleled. His theories aligned with Christian beliefs, leading to his ideas being elevated to an almost sacred status by religious followers. His approach to medicine, which combined elements of astrology, abstract concepts of the four humors, and practical observation, influenced medical practices for over 1,000 years.
That's an incredible legacy. How does Galen's work compare to medical traditions in other parts of the world?
That's a great question. Interestingly, around the same time as Galen's work, Zhang Zhongjing's treatise on cold damage disorders and miscellaneous illnesses emerged in China. While Zhang Zhongjing established the fundamental paradigm of syndrome differentiation in Chinese medicine, Galen laid the groundwork for the investigative thinking in Western medicine. From this point, Eastern and Western medical traditions began to diverge significantly.
That's fascinating. Were there any similarities between these two traditions?
Despite their differences, both Eastern and Western medicine shared a common limitation: their ineffectiveness in the face of major epidemics. Even in modern times, limited medical resources proved inadequate against large-scale infectious diseases. Consequently, plagues repeatedly swept across the Eurasian continent.
It seems like these plagues had a significant impact on society. How did this affect Europe in particular?
You're absolutely right. After enduring numerous wars, plagues, and natural disasters, Europeans began to lose faith in their own capabilities and in reason itself. This loss of confidence ushered in the Dark Ages in European history. It was a period of great uncertainty and regression in many areas of knowledge and society.
Wow, what an incredible journey through medical history. Thank you so much for sharing all this fascinating information about Galen and the development of medicine in the ancient world.
It's been my pleasure. The history of medicine is truly a captivating subject, and Galen's story shows us how one individual can have such a profound and lasting impact on human knowledge and practice. It also reminds us of the importance of continual learning and adaptation in the field of medicine.